So McAllen is known for being, one of the premier cities in the Rio Grande Valley. A lot of it, like you say, because of their planning, always preparing for the future. Past leaderships, it starts with like the grid system. Our streets, it's the grid system and how they're named in certain order. There's a structure to it. But ideally, we're landlocked.
We are.
And so last year, the city of McAllen purchased 1,288 acres, North McAllen. Talk to us about that, how you all got to that point, and what is the ideal plan for that land. So, Commissioner Seby Haddad, you are the Chief Lending Officer at Lone Star National Bank, a.k.a. the Valley's Bank.
That's right.
So why does Lone Star consider themselves the Valley's Bank?
Well, I mean, aside from the fact that it was founded in FAR, and I think just last year we celebrated our 40th year anniversary, and our primary focus has always been on the Rio Grande Valley. And a big part of that is not only servicing the general financial needs of the community and the business community, but a big focus, and I think a big part of Lone Star's mantra, is ensuring that we can provide financial services to the underserved, to the people that might not have as easy access to capital. I think our level of giving back to the community really exceeds most of the other banks. And not to say what they do isn't good, but part of Lone Star's board, and I think what's always been part of their mission, is to give back to the community. And you can see that in our footprint. You can see that in the number of employees that we have in the Rio Grande Valley. And there's no doubt you can see that in the amount that we give back to hundreds of organizations each and every year.
Almost every public event that I look at, all of the banners, who are all of the supporters, Lone Star is always at the top. And it's not we're the low end sponsor. It's always top 2, top 3. So
there's always more and more pressure to sponsor this and sponsor that. But we're good supporters of stabilized, good organizations that always provide the services in the Rio Grande Valley, right? So we typically don't also donate to organizations that just take the money and go and take it out. But I'm always happy to see that those banners are filled with community banks. And I think that comes to show how important community banks are to any area.
Yeah, I mean, banking, obviously, there's profit involved, right? That's the main driver. But I think that it's in the bank's best interest to make sure that the long-term stability of a region that they lend in is, prosperous for the future. So community banks, I think, after COVID made a big impact, or had a big impact, because of all of the PPP loans. I mean, there was big banks, doing PPP loans, but it was your local banks that were really there to help you. You could go in, talk to someone, they were able to help guide you through the process. PPP loans in South Texas, how did Lone Star take that on during such a tough time when it...
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those government programs that was kind of rolled out with very little instruction. But once the portal was opened, we just knew we had to kind of take it and run with it. And Lone Star really jumped on that wagon and said, hey, these are federal funds that are being made available to our local small business owners. So let's make sure they have access to it. And we pretty much worked 24/7 to churn out over 6,000 loans. To put that in perspective, typically, and realize that the lending for the first phase of PPP was about 6 weeks before the money ran out. The second PPP, right, the second wave of PPP, the money lasted a tad longer as everyone applied, a few months. But if you take about a 90-day window where you could get PPP applications in, the bank did about 6,000 loans amounting to about $240 or $260 million. So we took federal funds that were available and brought that down here for the small business community to utilize. And those 6,000 loans is usually about 6 to 7 years of lending activity for Lone Star.
Wow.
And really in a 90-day period, right, if you cram down. So we were taking applications, getting them submitted, and turning out loan docs and signatures, and ensuring that we got them funded, right, because it was kind of a first in, first out program. So we wanted the local business to get as much access to those funds as possible.
I've spoken to many, many business owners that receive PPP funds, and they're like, literally, I don't know what I would have done if it wasn't for that. So I'm sure two things that came out of that. Number one, you helped a lot of people, but number two, I think it shows what you and your team can pump out if you guys really focus together. So right now it's a very different environment in the lending community.
It is.
Banks are approving less loans and they're being more selective on what kind of loans that they do. How has your team adapted to continue to service the market with these different environmental factors?
Yeah, of course. I mean, being around 40 years, you have to lend in whatever environment exists out there. You can't control the external factors. To some extent, you really can't control the economic factors. So you have to figure out the appetite and the risk tolerance that you want to kind of lend into, right? And so a lot of what we do is really just assessing different industries, and we look at which ones have historically been ones that work for the bank and we're able to lend into with sort of minimal blowback or less likelihood of default. And, those industries typically will always thrive in the Rio Grande Valley. For the most part, Lone Star National Bank, like most community banks, is primarily a real estate lender. So if it's a real estate-based transaction, you're going to be able to get financing. Obviously, most banks, in the 90s and 80s, you had a lot of asset-based lending. Sure, that's a good piece of collateral. Let's do the loan. All right, not much to it. How could we lose? Well, through just regulation and examinations and just banks tightening up, it really moved towards a credit-based lending through the 2000s. And that's really what you see today. And so someone could have a property that's at a 20% loan to value, 50% loan to value, and the bank is still going to focus on credit-based lending. And with elevated rates, well, it changes the dynamic of the profitability of that property or the viability of that real estate being developed and turning a profit. And so the banks are looking at it from a stance of, does this property self-sustain, or does this property or the project, is it going to have the proper return to not only complete the debt service, but we want to ensure that it's a good investment and business decision for the person that we're financing.
Yeah, with interest rates higher, I mean, it doesn't mean, hey, shut down business, we can't operate anymore. No. It means, how do we redo the business, the financial model, and essentially your margins are either going to be tighter or you're going to get creative and figure out how to, remove some of that heavy excess that's holding you down. What industries in South Texas, your clients, the customers that are coming in, are you seeing that are growing and slowing down?
Well, you have a tremendous amount of government work coming in. What people don't realize is, although COVID was in 2020, let's say going into 2021, the amount of government spending that occurred from COVID until even some of the CHIPS Act that we see today, the infrastructure bills that have come out. Well, when those bills are signed, you usually don't see them. It takes a while for them to actually go from paperwork and approval to implementation and funding. And then you've got municipalities and counties and states that have to apply for those funds. So you usually see a 2 to 4 year lag until you really start to see those funds getting utilized. And I think that's the point that we're in today. And so when you see a tremendous amount of access for government to get federal funds for infrastructure or industry to tap into any kind of amenity that the government's providing, you're going to see an increase in construction. You're going to see an increase in the need for labor, manual labor. You're going to see the need for trade, everything from welders to electricians to plumbers.
Yeah.
And that also increases the level of work that you need for engineers. Engineers, I think, are overburdened. Even we have a lot of engineers in the Rio Grande Valley, but I've seen timelines for surveys go from 3 to 5 days to 3 to 5 weeks.
Yes.
And they've got so much work on their plate. So general contractors, and they're purchasing equipment. So now you've got equipment resellers and equipment providers and insurance providers. A lot of those industries are just drastically affected by this type of spending. So it's going to be a positive for our area. And I think it's going to, from Cameron County with LNG and SpaceX all the way over here to Hidalgo County, where you see the expansion of almost 3 bridges about to occur on top of the improvements in the foreign trade zone and expanding that. You're going to see a lot of emphasis on infrastructure and growing the region. And, TxDOT has been extremely kind to the Rio Grande Valley, and we're fortunate to have a really strong partnership with TxDOT. But the amount of spending that they're going to be doing here in the next decade is probably quadruple what they had done in the previous decade.
Yeah, I mean, overall, the valley is being built in all different sectors, right? There's residential being built, there's retail, there's medical, and then obviously you have things like, someone's building a rocket to Mars, right?
That's right.
From Boca Chica Beach. Lone Star National Bank has a reputation of being a builder's bank, right? You have a lot of builders that go and get construction loans, which a lot of banks consider higher risk, right?
Right.
How focused is Lone Star National Bank on continuing to be the bank where, builders go?
Yeah, I think it's still one of our primary focuses. And as the lending officer who pretty much approves a lot of the loans that come through, surprisingly, the amount of construction loans that we're still doing is probably higher than last year. And you're correct. A lot of our board is comprised of builders and developers. Our chairman himself started as a residential contractor to some extent. And so we feel that we're very comfortable in that space. And on top of that, we like to see the growth and we like to fund growth. And when you're in construction, that's basically what you're doing. You're adding tax base, you're developing, you're building, you're providing a home for someone. And so for us, residential construction ties into home ownership. And that's a big part of what we also try to do, right? Is we want to put people into mortgages. We want people to say, Lone Star National Bank financed my first home. We want to make sure that families are stabilized down here, because if they're working and they're feeling good and they have a home and they have access to capital, they're able to thrive. And so, sure, we've had some hiccups over the years like any bank, but I think we've fine-tuned it to where we actually do a really good job with construction lending. Yeah,
the process, the flow.
Correct.
The biggest hurdle is, how quick can we get this loan closed? And then, every builder that I talk to, what's the draw process, right?
Of course.
So, making sure that process ensures their success, I'm sure, is your focus.
Yes, of course. We always want to be streamlined and we want to be efficient, but you're right. When it comes to whether it's mortgages or the builder, it's how fast can I close and when can I get my money? And so we try to get that done as fast as possible.
So interest rates historically are not at an all-time high, but in the last decade at an all-time high. There's a lot of people that are making predictions that interest rates will continue to go up. Some say, there might be a discount of 25 basis points coming our way. What's your prediction of interest rates?
Yeah, well, that's difficult because we usually base our predictions on someone else's predictions, right? You're always looking to the experts in the market, in the Fed. And so we've gotten more comfortable watching the volatility of these predictions. I think before, when you go back to late 2023, there was a lot of emphasis on what's going to happen with the rates in next year, right? And people would be surprised that in October of 23 or so, they predicted up to 7 rate decreases for 2024.
Wow.
Which threw a loop through the bank's ability to budget and how we're going to price loans and clients' expectations. By January, that had dropped to 5 times. By February, it dropped to 3 times. We saw March, April, where they said we're going to have 1 rate decrease, and it's not even going to be till late in the year. And we saw that kind of hold steady for about 60 days where there's not going to be a rate decrease until end of year. Get used to it. And the most recent kind of data and economics and surveys that they do with a lot of these analysts is that it's now inching towards 2 rate decreases. But you're looking at possibly September and then possibly November. So that could change back down to 1 rate decrease. So to some extent, for banks, the stability of rates helps us out. It's a good way for us to be able to plan and price. But we've also seen investors accustom themselves to, hey, this is the new rate environment.
Yeah.
And so when they were pulling back earlier, thinking, I'm going to wait 4 months for the rate decreases, well, they realized, I can't hold on to my capital. I need to invest it. I need to put it to work. And so we see them coming back to the banks and saying, I need to put this money to work. I'm going to green light this project. Will you finance it? And so that's a positive thing.
Yeah.
But seeing that reinvestment and seeing that money churned back into the market, it's probably going to continue to apply pressure where rates are likely not to decrease because you still have a tremendous amount of spending and a tremendous amount of economic activity. And as long as that continues to occur and the market doesn't necessarily soften, the Feds are not going to reduce rates until inflation gets back to their 2% threshold.
Yeah, and it's difficult because, the Federal Reserve, a lot of people don't understand it, but they're balancing two things, right? They're balancing the interest rate, and then they're balancing unemployment.
Correct.
And right now, I think, from an employment standpoint, things are looking very good positively, right? From an inflation,
And it's too good from an unemployment standpoint.
yeah, and
I've never been in a time. I don't think a time's existed where they've actually said it would be preferable if unemployment was a tad higher.
yeah,
It's applying a lot of pressure to the market.
yeah, and in a time where jobs are also very different, the type of jobs that people have, creation of Uber Eats and DoorDash. I mean, you have a lot of different type of professions that may not fit the standard mold, but they pay well, and you can hustle and make money. Let's take change the subject to the city of McAllen and focus on that. You are the city commissioner. You represent District 5, some people will call it the heart of McAllen.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, your other fellow commissioners might argue that. Right now, District 5, you're kind of, you're in the middle. Talk to us a little bit about your district. Talk to us some of the special assets or places that you...
Yeah, I mean, McAllen's broken up into 6 districts, and District 5 is the one that's kind of in the middle, and it's really the only district that touches every other district. So I've got District 5 has a boundary with every other district, being that it's kind of sandwiched in the middle. And it's probably also the district that has the longest kind of north-south stretch. And so it extends almost near the expressway, just north of the expressway. And now, with redistricting last year, it actually parts of it push all the way to Lark, when previously it went closer to Nolana or so. And so the district has grown, obviously, as population... we had population disparity between the districts, so we had to rebalance that. But it's just a very interesting district because from the north side to the south side is completely different neighborhoods. And we're also the one district that it's all sandwiched with residential alongside commercial corridors, have almost no gated subdivisions. So you've got a lot of mixed and blended neighborhoods, right? And as our city becomes more and more urban, that comes with frustrations from certain people, but it also comes with opportunity for others. And so it's a hard balance to blend in, the level of opportunity with kind of preserving the character of the neighborhood, which is something that comes up a lot.
The old and the new.
Yes, that's right. So we have, it includes the entertainment district, includes the arts districts, which we all know is Main Street. It includes the library and the museum, and a lot of those amenities. And so we see it kind of, District 5 has a lot of parts that make McAllen what it is, and including a lot of the older neighborhoods. So we have a lot of kind of old neighborhoods and established families and groups of people who care a lot about their city. So it's a very active district, includes Old Town, and some of those parts. And the historic district, we do have a historic district where we preserve the character of the buildings and things of that nature. And so it's a lot to balance, but we've got great staff at the city of McAllen, and we do our best to ensure that we continue to revitalize parts of it that maybe are aging or don't have as much attention as they used to. And so we have focused on a lot of the inner streets, the alleys. We have focused on downtown. We've done a tremendous amount for the inner city parks. I want to call them inner city parks because District 5 has a few parks that are kind of entrenched between neighborhoods, very different from the other parks that we see where it's kind of a park that was built out and in certain areas, right? So District 5 is unique. There's no doubt about that.
So McAllen's broken up into 6 districts, and, you have a commissioner that represents each district.
Single member.
Yeah, single member. McAllen is not known, the city leadership is not known for having a lot of internal drama, right? Or at least you all do a good job of, not letting it come to the public. You take care of it behind executive session, and you come out and you work for the best for the people. How is it working with the leadership in McAllen, and how do you guys remain united in everything that you do?
Well, the benefit of the city of McAllen is it's got incredible, sophisticated infrastructure within city government. So even when I came on as an elected official in 2019, you have to jump onto a very fast-moving train, a very efficient, fast-moving, well-running machine. And so when you jump onto something like that, you automatically, as an elected official, have a tremendous amount of resources, data, departments, and great people that can provide you the tools necessary to accomplish our job. And, we have a great office with city management that I think operates with the best of intent. And they're very good stewards of kind of the operational aspects of our government. And we're very transparent, very honest. We ensure that I think all the elected officials, all of city management is typically always on the same page as to what's in front of us. And then our differing opinions will come to some consensus or make a decision or make changes or amendments. And I think we do a good job of bringing items to the table. And then city management does a great job of following through and bringing that back to the commission to either execute or modify or do something with, right? And obviously a big part of what we do is always looking forward. So the benefit of a lot of what we do, a lot of the infrastructure projects, a lot of our drainage, we're looking to the growth that's coming, and we're already starting to fund the needs for that growth. And so we're never going to catch up, right?
Yeah.
But I think a lot of what the city of McAllen is good at is planning for the future. And I think we might all differ in opinion, but we're all aligned in the focus and in the mission of what we need to do, what's best for our residents. And so as long as we understand that we're all headed towards the same destination, we can discuss and figure out how to get there.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's been fortunately a very good environment. And we've had very strong elected officials. I'm fortunate to work with some of the smartest people that I know. And I enjoy having smarter people than me in the room. So that's always a positive.
McAllen, you talk about we're always focused on the future, long-term growth, the next generation that's going to have to live with whatever decisions are made, right? McAllen has a reputation of partnering with third parties to serve a purpose. Right now, the Palm Valley Animal Society, you all are working together on a new animal shelter. I know that you personally, this is something that is close to your heart. Talk to us about that and the need for it and why the community should be thankful that this is coming to life.
Yes, well, animal welfare was one of the things from my initial campaign. And we started small. We made some ordinance changes. We focused on changes within the department. We moved it out from under PD and under code enforcement, provided a little more flexibility and control by city management onto how they operate and the culture of the department. And but when it was at PD, we even increased their pay slightly because we realized that they were being poached, or it was easy for them to move over to a different type of position. And so we had to make it competitive so they would want to stay, because it's a very, very tough job. But when we started talking to our partners, we said, well, how do we tackle this animal welfare issue in McAllen? And not just in McAllen, really in the entire region.
Yeah.
And we said, well, let's look at the process and see what we need to do to change it, because we've been doing the same process for, let's say, 30, 40 years, and yet the problems either stayed the same or gotten bigger.
Yeah.
And so although sometimes it's kind of, we see animal control picks up an animal and takes it, the general public might believe, well, good, that animal's taken care of. But all the animal intake facilities and all the organizations and the rescue organizations are at capacity, under-resourced, out of money. And so we realize that what we're really doing is restraining all these organizations, including PVAS, which is our strongest partner, restraining them to give the illusion that the city is fixing the problem. And so this takes a lot of community buy-in, because we're changing how we operate and we're reducing intake. We're not picking up every single animal, which we've gotten a little bit of heat for. But the long run is to help PVAS build a facility that is going to obviously allow them to be as efficient as possible, which will allow them to take in more animals, separate the sick from the healthy, be able to coordinate with more rescues. And then what we want, this is kind of the near term, right? Once the facility's there and they're able to operate more efficiently, they're able to control their funds better, because a tremendous amount of what PVAS spends is simply on maintenance and upkeep and ACs and coverings and tarps. things that should not be spent on, all right? So it's about time we invest in that facility. And it was a difficult decision by the city commission, and it was one that we have been looking at for the last year, even longer, 2 years, because realistically, we're spending taxpayer dollars on a private facility that's out of our city, right? It actually sits in the city of Edinburgh. And so we're hoping that the city of Edinburgh will join us as well. We've had discussions with them. I know they're looking at their own budgets and what their needs might be. And, you know, we've reached out to the county, and I know the county, I think, might go in a different direction or has a plan of their own. But we do think that it's going to be a step in the right direction. And we're really excited to help PVES in this endeavor. And don't forget, PVES themselves is going to do a capital campaign and fund it up to $2 million on their own.
Yeah.
You know, so we put in $1, they're putting in $1. So it'll be a good venture.
People, when they hear like, oh, another animal shelter, yeah, you pick up strays. So what happens in a city that doesn't have that type of service to pick up strays? Paint me a picture of what McAllen would look like if this service wasn't there.
I mean, and animals themselves don't stay with it. They don't understand boundaries, right? So the urban aspect of McAllen typically will push animals out anyway, because it's hard concrete, it's hot, not a lot of shade maybe in certain areas. So the animals themselves will eventually just make their way out into a more rural area, right? But then they can't find food. They've got no access to water. And I think what it is we have a society in McAllen, or our community cares a lot about animal welfare. I would venture to say 1 out of 2 homes probably has a pet. And so this is a value-driven approach. We're taking the values of our community and saying, sure, there might not be a monetary ROI on this, but this is something that our community holds as a value, something that they say, we're proud to say that we take animal welfare seriously, and we're willing to invest to handle that situation. But obviously over time, and this is going to be kind of the long haul, is to reduce the animal population to simply animals that are taken care of, that are healthy, that are in homes, very few strays. We want to reduce the breeding. We want to reduce the, street sellers, and all that will come with a little bit of time. And hopefully there's a time when the intake facilities are empty. And, there's places up north. If you don't realize, we're sending a ton of our animals down here to places up north. We're flying hundreds and hundreds of dogs to communities up north because those communities say, we want dogs. They don't have an animal welfare problem because they've already solved it. And they're actually looking for dogs.
More animals?
They're looking for more animals. So we fly them up and they're ready to accept them, and they put them in homes. And so, sure, eventually can we get there? Possibly. But it's going to take a massive campaign through the rural communities, to some of the colonias. It's going to be a lot of community outreach, a lot of education, because there is, I think a good part of the culture down here doesn't see anything wrong with having a dog tied up to the tree, and as long as they have a bowl of
water,
stale water. Yeah. It's not something that is frowned upon quite yet as heavily as it should. But I think we're going to take a positive, proactive approach to that, and hopefully down the road we'll be able to get some vets and just do constant spay and neuter, and you'll see the population completely diminish as far as strays and animals not being taken care of through spay and neuter. That's the only way we can do it. But that comes down to, you have to have a facility that can
do it,
that can handle it, and you need to have a facility that we can attract vets.
Yeah, when my wife and I just moved into a new house in McAllen, and the first thing, there was a neighbor walking her dog, and she walks by me, and I said, hello. And the first thing that she told me was, don't feed the cats. We have a real cat problem.
Yeah.
And so I know there's a lot of places around McAllen that they may not understand the impact of this, but in the long term, I think we'll be able to look back and measure, how it has impacted, like you say, the value. We're meeting those values. So moving on to McAllen growth, the future of McAllen. So McAllen is known for being, one of the premier cities in the Rio Grande Valley. A lot of it, like you say, because of their planning, always preparing for the future. Past leaderships, it starts with like the grid system. Our streets, it's the grid system and how they're named in certain order. There's a structure to it. but ideally we're landlocked.
We are.
And so last year, the city of McAllen purchased 1,288 acres, North McAllen. Talk to us about that, how you all got to that point, and what is the ideal plan for that land?
Yeah, of course. So it was actually, the city of McAllen purchased a portion of it. If you're familiar with the foreign trade zone, kind of off military, it goes back to the foreign trade zone. When it was started, it was just raw land, and someone envisioned this massive space, get a foreign trade zone designation and bring in industry, bring in warehousing, bring in logistics, bring in all those types of industries that would benefit towards higher paying jobs, which results in higher quality of life and in turn results in a better community that allows retail and hospitality and all of that to thrive. And so I think there was an extension of a foreign trade zone. At one point, I think it was like 10, 25 miles from the border. And at some point, that got extended out, because borders are all very different. It got extended to like 100 miles or something. Well, that gives the capacity of McAllen's foreign trade zone to grow outside of their original footprint. And so I think it was always an idea that they needed to grow. They're out of space. We have almost 98% of the buildings leased. There's one more building they're going to build, but they're waiting on a levy, and that could get rented. But the foreign trade zone is almost maxed out, which is great for the city of McAllen and great for industry, but we want it to grow, right? And so when they started looking around, obviously Moorfield became a very strategic position for several reasons. One, it's got an airstrip, which is very interesting. Don't know exactly how it might be utilized in the future, but provides a level, an amenity that could drive certain industries down here, right?
Cost savings. You don't have to build it.
That's right. And so you've got an airstrip with 3 runways. If you don't realize, it has 3 runways.
Yeah.
And they're pretty lengthy. They're almost military style length, which is huge because you have a higher capacity for
the type of cargo.
Yeah. And you take that, and then you've got access. If you look at kind of TxDOT's plans and the plan for the loop, as they say, it all runs through that area. So it's going to provide super quick access to 69, and there's going to be a way to connect it to the bridges. So it's going to be able to get off the main roads and get the trucks off the main roads and utilize it. And the foreign trade zone actually purchased a good portion of the property. The foundation, there's a foundation that purchased a part of it. And then the city of McAllen came in and kicked in and purchased the remainder. So I think total, it's somewhere in the range of 1,200, 1,400, 1,500 acres, all surrounding Moorfield Air Base. Now, realize that Moorfield Air Base is really run and owned by the federal government, and they've got a massive USDA facility out there. So the USDA has one of its most important kind of research kind of facilities and they've invested, I don't even know, $50, $70 million since putting it in there, and I think they're doing a tremendous amount more. So the USDA isn't going anywhere. And so we've had a real healthy discussions about partnering with the USDA, and they're looking at a huge expansion that could possibly lease and build a piece of property on the new foreign trade zone and be the first tenant. But really what you want to do is you want to create a new space for industry that gives them all the benefits of a foreign trade zone.
Yeah, it's interesting. You hear McAllen making moves like that, and you wonder, wow, what is the future going to look like? McAllen, from west to east, I believe it's like 6 miles wide. North to south, I think we're reaching probably over 27 miles now. I could be wrong on that 27 being more. What other parts of McAllen do you see real opportunities for different types of industry? I know McAllen, king of retail, South Texas.
Of course.
Yeah, retail, we got it. We're good at it. But what other kind of areas for growth in McAllen do you see?
Well, the areas themselves, you can kind of follow it. And so you see McAllen kind of grows in its own organic path. And so, like you said, we're landlocked. And so if you go directly north, you just basically hit Edinburgh, which is why McAllen sort of grew in this northwest pattern, kind of took a little bit of a curve and then started continuing to grow up north. The benefit of that is that the more land or property or development that occurs within the city of McAllen allows us to continue to annex, right? And so annexation was restricted a while back. And so we have to work on continuing to increase kind of our ETJ. And your ETJ extends from where your kind of city line is, right? So doing massive projects, kind of like the partnership with Tres Lagos into a TERS, and doing this project with the foreign trade zone only extends and protects our ETJ. So what we're really doing is preserving and protecting the ability of McAllen to even grow. Because if we weren't expanding and doing all of that, at some point other municipalities just organically, not intentionally, could sort of envelop McAllen and we'd be cut off. And the only way McAllen could either grow or expand would be to do it on top of what you already have.
Vertical.
Right? And so we want to do both. I mean, I think there's a lot of potential for people to revitalize some older parts of South 10th. We see a lot of stuff happening on Main Street. You see tremendous amount of remodels going on throughout the older neighborhoods. And that's all great because you're increasing the value of those properties. They already have an existing value, and now people are investing 2-3 times as much in increasing the tax base. So you want that to occur, but you also want to add to the tax roll. Each new development, each new lot, each new commercial strip center creates revenue for the city. And that revenue is how we provide the services to the citizens. And the demand, I think we've set such a high bar for the level of services that we provide that the demand not only for those services to continue, but expand them continues to increase. And the only way to do that is to continue adding to the tax base.
You have to pay for it somehow, right?
You do.
But I think that when people come to McAllen, I think they feel the value. You know, you clean roads, sidewalks, parks, you know, in comparison per capita.
Well, you see
the quality of life is here.
Yeah.
What do you see as your biggest next project that you're working on?
Well, honestly, the PVES project is one of the ones that we've been really heavily focused on. And at the same time, you mentioned it, getting a lot of the logistics, and there's some roads and things that we need over in this new foreign trade zone or the extension of the foreign trade zone are hypercritical. I would say there's probably about 3 other projects that just came to mind right away. But they're in that stage where we can't quite reveal it. The city of McAllen is still, we want to ensure that they come to fruition.
Yeah.
And so we're either waiting on a land acquisition, on an offer, or we're waiting on some design to come back in. There's some LOIs and some commitments that have already been made of some stuff that's coming into the city that I think people will be really excited about. And so it's sometimes hard to feel like an official because the government, to some extent, as fast as you want it to move, still moves a little bit at not as quite as the private sector, right?
Slow as fast.
So sometimes it's hard to hold these things in because, we've known them for a year, you know them for a year and a half, you know them for 2 years, and you work on them for so long. Some of these things we've been working on even the last 3 years or so. But that kind of steadfast work, and I think just being diligent and continuing to push it through and not letting it die out is why a lot of times you see, these things just pop up in McAllen and be like, oh, McAllen got this, McAllen did that. They don't realize there's a lot of work that goes into it behind the scenes. And it's very easy with everything that's going on day-to-day or new stuff that comes in to kind of let it sit on the back burner.
Yeah.
So we have to keep a lot of these things on the forefront. And that's one of the things city management does extremely well. And I think as a commission, we're very good at continuing to follow up on projects that are in the works. But we do have there's some great things coming if it all kind of lines up right.
We're going to have you back to give that first glimpse.
Oh, yeah, we will.
So last thing that I want to finish with, as a city commissioner, as a leader at Lone Star National Bank, working in the region, how important is regionalism?
Super important. So let's just start with our MPO. Our MPO is pretty young, right? And so they're still in that process where they're doing a lot of the plans and engineering to have shovel-ready projects. But as those projects start to come online, the MPO's got a massive amount of funds available to them. And I think when you go back to the amount of money that was allocated to us, I think you go back and kind of when everyone was separate, right? Let's just go when everyone was separate, you had $200 or $300 million coming to the area, bunch of separate projects, disconnected from each other, different infrastructure projects. A lot of them probably could have been paired. And from a regional standpoint, as soon as all these cities got together, it went to over $1.2 billion.
Yeah.
Right. So
buying power.
We're tapping into resources that are being, capital from outside the area, whether it's federal funds, state funds, or even just investment, private sector dollars, equity groups, doesn't matter. It's money that's being poured down in the Rio Grande Valley. So just looking at it from that, you could see the actual dollar signs and the difference. But we're a powerhouse when we're together. If you put the counties together, it's a lot easier to go to Austin and say, hey, I have 1.4 million people that want this, right?
Yeah.
Instead of going up and say, well, my population is 60,000 or my population 140,000 or my population of 93,000. No, group them up and say, hey, we're a stronghold. We're an economic powerhouse. The amount of produce and trade that comes in through the bridges, and incredibly the FAR Bridge that spans out to the rest of the United States, is huge. The impact that we have for the state of Texas alone is huge. And so I think a lot of that has been to stress that and invite a lot of the legislators down throughout Texas, because I get it. They get stuck in the triangle, right? You have San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, Austin. And
they don't know what they don't know.
That's right. They don't know what they don't know. So sometimes we invite them down. We have them visit the bridges. We talk to them about the level of trade, the billions of dollars at stake, the amount of money that sits if you had one more lane, right? And so they see that because they see how it can residually affect their community and the way it affects the state. And so you align with their needs, right? They might not care exactly about a new retail center that comes in the center of McAllen, but they care about the food supply and the residual benefit to the state of Texas. And so you just have to let them know, hey, our benefits are your benefits. And you just have to make them aware of the strength that we have down here. But it has to be a regional approach, because our resources pulled together can do a lot more than everyone kind of doing it separately.
Commissioner Seby Haddad, thank you so much for your time. We expect to have you back for more announcements.
You tell me when.
All right. Thank you.